How's it going, people? Lateness is greatness, and it is a fantastic day. We are coming off the back of a Chelsea win, so I'm joined by some fantastic guests. First of all, Mike, how are you doing, bro?
I'm doing so well. Thank you so much for inviting us. Obviously, huge fan of yours on social media. Love what you do with the brand. Love to see good things are happening to you. Thank you for having us two Americans here on your show.
100%. Thank you so much, man. And Chris, how are you doing, bro?
Doing great, and I will echo what Mike said. I'm trying to dig further and deeper into Chelsea fandom, and following people like yourself is massive for that. So shout out to everyone in Chelsea Twitter.
Love that. Fantastic. Well, guys, I mean, there's a lot to talk about, and of course, I know you've interviewed a lot of the players as well, so that will give us a unique perspective on what is a very big squad, and it's a squad that's staying together. It's been the quietest deadline day you could possibly wish for in your life. I mean, obviously, the pandemic and all of the finances involved meant that it was quiet. But a lot of people were saying, I hope that we can shift some players out. I hope that we can, declutter the squad somewhat. But literally, the whole squad has stayed together. I know Tuchel's comments have been, saying that it's fine. We've got a big squad, but we're going to need it for the 3 competitions that we're left in. But first of all, Mike, what do you make of the squad size? Are you worried at all about rotation and stuff like that? Obviously, Billy Gilmour looks like he's going to stay.
I'm super happy about Billy saying he's a personal favorite. He joined us on Chelsea Mic'd Up, and we absolutely fell in love with the kid, and his play backs up that love in droves. I'm really happy that he gets to be a part of this Chelsea ride going forward. I think a deep squad is immense right now, not just because it's a pandemic, not just because of the European fixtures, not just because we have a new manager that is trying to figure out the right players. We mentioned this on this week's episode of Chelsea Mic'd Up. Sometimes we like to seize on a small sample and read too much into things when it just might be someone needs a rest. I think that when you see Marcos Alonso come back into the squad, that wasn't really an avenue that we had open because of what he had going on with Frank Lampard. So now we're all back at the same baseline. Everyone has an equal opportunity to impress this manager who, I know it's early on, but might seem to favor rotation, which might keep a lot of people happy. If you're married to the idea of Ben Chilwell and Reece James being your left and right back, well, those positions aren't really available right now because there is no left and right back. We're playing something a little bit different right now, but that's added depth. Being able to have a Marcos Alonso, his ability to get in the box, he's so instinctual. That's just not something he had available to us. I understand there are defensive deficiencies, but for each opponent, you can take them on their face value and apply the right player for it. Before, you didn't have that avenue open. Now you do. And I like that Thomas Tuchel has all his options available.
Yeah. And one of the things that this squad has struggled with massively is when they get the ball into the box from the right-hand side, they flash the ball in time and time again. Great deliveries from whether it be Hudson-Odoi or Reece James, and there's no one at the back post there. You can guarantee that Marcos Alonso is going to be there. Chris, what do you make of Gilmour specifically? He's obviously staying. Do you worry about his game time? Obviously, we know there's a hierarchy, maybe politics at play. Jorginho, Kovacic, they're a lot older on bigger contracts. They're obviously probably going to take up more of the game time to keep the squad pushing in the one direction. What do you make of, Gilmour not going out on loan? Did you want him to go out on loan, or are you happy for him to stay?
Well, I do think that the politics probably don't play a role with this manager because Thomas Tuchel does have a history of giving youth a chance. So I don't think he's going to look at Billy Gilmour and say, I don't rate this player because of his contract and his age. He's going to say, can he help us win? I do kind of wonder if a loan move might have served him a little bit because Tuchel did lay a seed for maybe why Gilmour wouldn't play for him because he said, I don't know if he's physical enough to play in the Premier League in the role that we're asking him to play in. So I do kind of wonder if that seed will lead you to believe that maybe he won't play as much. But I agree completely with what Mike said, which is that everyone's got a chance now. Everyone has an opportunity to make their impact on this Chelsea squad. And so maybe at some point in training, Billy Gilmour really impresses Thomas Tuchel with what we've seen out of Billy Gilmour when he's played. All those same skills can be immensely useful to any manager, really. So I would imagine he'll get a chance at some point, but I don't know if that'll be necessary in the near term. And I understand maybe why some Chelsea fans wanted to see him go get some games somewhere else.
Yeah. I mean, there were links with like Southampton, and I was always, first of all, worried about, because there's 2 ways of going about it. Of course, if he goes out on loan, you want him to go to a team that ideally play with possession, on the front foot, play good football and also are going to give him the minutes as well. And then you've got to pick a league that suits him as well, potentially. But then if you keep him, you potentially have a Phil Foden situation we've seen at Man City, where you keep the player, you develop the player. Obviously, Tuchel is a very good coach in the fact that he can improve individual quality as well. So that's something that maybe they looked into in terms of keeping him. It's weird, you know. Chelsea throughout the years have had so many blockbuster, dynamic, dramatic deadline days, and today we're just sitting there, just twiddling our thumbs, just like, well, whatever. Do you know what I mean? There's nothing going on. But I can't lie. After all the drama we had last week, I'm actually okay with it. I'm not gonna lie. I'm pretty cool with just no noise, no ins, no outs, no shake it all about. It's just everybody calm, collective, and just cool. What was your reaction to obviously last week? Because it was a little bit dramatic. We'll start with you, Chris. Just what did you make of the whole? Did you expect it? Was you expecting the manager to just be, you know, gone like that, or did it come as a bit of a shock?
Yeah, I mean, I'm following the media reports as much as anybody else is, and it did kind of seem like it was heading this way. It did seem like they wanted to get the permanent guy in. Otherwise, it might have happened probably before the Luton Town match. But just the congested nature of everything was probably the reason why it lasted until the match against Wolves. But, I mean, I can't say I was terribly surprised. I just don't think Chelsea in this modern era are ever going to take 7th, 8th in the Premier League midway through a season, particularly when that manager has had some time, albeit not enough probably with the new signings. Like, I completely understand the case that a lot of Chelsea fans are making, which is Frank Lampard deserved more time with this specific group of players to figure out the solutions that he needed to figure out. But I also understand when Chelsea have the expectations for themselves to, at the very minimum, be a Champions League club, that if it's not trending in that direction, that a change needs to be made. That's ultimately a fair play to him for at least being consistent. And I'm kind of at least a little bit surprised that maybe the fans haven't come to expect it at this point, that the fans just sort of know this is the expectation, this is the bar, and if you don't reach it, then you might pay for it with your job, and even if that's a club legend. So I wasn't terribly surprised just because of Chelsea's recent history, but I also completely understand why some fans weren't on board with it.
Yeah. And Mike, what did you make of obviously Tuchel's come in? What have you made of him in this first week? Because he's been really good with the media. I think he obviously switched up the formation immediately. The last back-to-back games, we've seen a 3-4-3, Hudson-Odoi at right wing back, and all of these new ideas coming into play. Size 2 footballs in training and everything. What have you made of him in his early days so far?
I think just you hit on it. So let's address like the PR aspect of this. I think he's getting really great advice. I think his interviews have been spectacular. I know that Frank Lampard reached out to him. I wouldn't be surprised if some of that good advice that he's getting is coming direct from the manager he replaced, quite honestly. This was very emotional for Chelsea fans, as you know. I barely remember the Wolves match, quite honestly, just because I was still mourning the manager, because I've never had a club legend manage a Roman Abramovich Chelsea team. And I really fell in love with that concept, that the days of sacking managers and chasing trophies, we were going to marry ourselves to a manager and a young core, and it was going to be this beautiful ride. I'm sure when we lay our head on our pillow at night and we have a really good result, we think like, well, this is it, gargantuan for the next 15 to 20 years. It's just going to be Mason and Frank Lampard arm in arm, and they're going to do so much winning together, and we're going to have parades when we get out of it. And I wasn't just mourning the loss of a manager that I became invested in, but I was mourning the loss of that dream, the dream of seeing Frank Lampard not just lift the big years as a player, but as a manager for his club. So it took me a minute. But if we beat Wolves and got all 3 points, it might have made the blow a little bit softer. But I think game over game, more training sessions than just the one that he had headed into Wolves, which is unfair. I think you actually see some solutions. It kind of felt like we were ramming our head against the wall because we didn't see the path to the answers. The answer was play better. And it seems as though, look, the club obviously went in the direction that they did, and they felt like, no, tactically, there can be something here that we can do that's different to get the better results. That being said, I love Frank, always will love Frank. It's an unenviable position Thomas Tuchel has right now because, look, we need to make it into Champions League. We have to perform in Champions League. The expectations that rose with the hot start that Chelsea had are still going to be there. They've recalibrated some, but the Premier League is still wide open. And there's a real opportunity here for Thomas Tuchel to lay a legacy here and not just be a bridge manager for someone else. He has my full support. I'm invested in this. And I think right now the vibes are generally good. You made mention to the fact that it's a quiet deadline day. I welcome that. I welcome smiles around there. I as ridiculous as it sounds like 3 weeks ago that Marcus Alonso would be scoring for Chelsea and then kissing the badge while he runs to a corner flag. Yeah. That was really cool to see. And for now, it seems as though everyone is pulling on the same rope.
Yeah, it's crazy, to be honest, because there's been such a flip. Obviously, a lot of players reintroduced as well. We talk about that transition from Lampard to Tuchel. That definitely helped with the quotes that he had in that press conference, having the messages with Frank as well, wishing him good luck, saying that, listen, I know you guys are hurting, but this is obviously not my fault. I'm just coming to take over. There's a little transition I felt in that press conference to take us into the new era. So I was quite happy to see that. Just to respond to this comment, yes, Gilmour is staying. That's confirmed, I think, by Matt Law earlier on today. And he said that he's done for the day. So that goes to show that, when he's checked out, that means nothing else is happening. And I think, like I said, Gilmour will be staying, and there won't be any more news really for Chelsea going in and out. And we can't really be surprised with the situation that's going on in the world as well, financially. I want to segue quickly to, Roman and Marina. They've been criticised quite a bit by some Chelsea fans in terms of, giving up on the project and not being, long-term, seekers in terms of continuing to hire and fire managers, criticised for signings as well that we're now finding out potentially were club signings and not Frank Lampard signings. Mike, what do you make of, Marina and Roman in general? Do you feel like they've been a bit harsh in the way that they've gone about this switch, or do you think, is there some logic to it, do you think?
Well, there's obviously logic to it. Look, it's not, I don't think it's overly complicated. Chelsea just weren't performing. And when you spend the money that they did in this transfer window and the bar is raised to, we're title contenders, obviously this is different. I do think that Roman Abramovich has learned from his reputation and has tried to stave it off somewhat. It's not just with Frank Lampard, because I think if we plug Frank Lampard into, say, 2011, maybe Frank Lampard gets fired a heck of a lot sooner. But there were all these fork in the road moments with recent managers in which the easy thing, the historical thing that Roman would do would be sack this manager, and he stayed the course. He did so with Sarri. He did so with Conte. Even Conte was heading up preseason training. It was insane how long Conte stuck around, given the media reports that were going on there. I do think Roman is different, but now the situation is different, in part because of the good work that Frank Lampard did. There are always going to be front office signings, and you make hires depending on, yes, this works for your manager. And I do think that Frank Lampard was supported the best that they could. Let's not forget, the elephant in the room here is there was a transfer ban. It's hard to support the manager with signings. They supported him in that, hey, the answer is here. And Frank Lampard, I think his legacy is that he finally opened up that path from the Cobham training ground. The academy players finally make the first team, and that to me is his true legacy. And that his story is not done at Chelsea. Frank Lampard, the manager, and I think that's why you saw Roman put his name to the statement in ways that we'd never seen before. He knew the emotion of the moment. It's always going to be ugly when your parents get divorced, for the kids and the parents are fighting. It's always going to, things are always going to leak out, and it's going to be ugly. But I do think that Frank Lampard did great with his messaging. I think the new manager is doing great with his messaging. Roman handled that as best as he could in that he put his own name to it. Right now, it seems as though everyone is in the boat to make this a positive experience, including the manager that just got sacked, because he could have made a mess of things too. Credit to him, uber professional the entire time. I think that, look, the signings just haven't gone well. And if you want to criticize signings, Kai Havertz and Timo Werner just haven't been the players they were told to be. Yeah. And I think you can't ignore that when you're looking at the decision when it came to sacking Frank Lampard. In part, they weren't performing, and it was happening on Frank Lampard's watch. And in many cases, he was undone by his own recruitment because he just couldn't unlock these players, whether it's a mental aspect or something that he was doing tactically. He just couldn't get through to these players. That, for me, is Tuchel's biggest job here at Chelsea.
Yeah.
Let's get the Kai Havertz and the Timo Werners that we all poured over YouTube highlights for days on end when we signed these players. We haven't seen those players yet. That is Tuchel's tall order.
I agree. I remember when we were looking at these players, the comps that were coming out, the propaganda, everybody was very excited. Feels like that's taken a massive nosedive. And also, when you speak about Roman, when it comes to Roman Abramovich, the last three managers, at least including Tuchel, at least I can say there's a clear, path in terms of wanting to play attacking football and being continuous with that, and wanting to sign young players for the future as well and promote youth. We've seen it with Hudson-Odoi and Ruben Loftus-Cheek under Sarri, and then it's continued, and obviously, thanks to the transfer ban, probably increased as well. Chris, I want to get your take on Marina, because the quotes came out today and it said something, like Chelsea's system and hierarchy is easy to follow. Just listen to Marina and do as she tells you, kind of way. And it was very much a way of maybe the way modern football is at the moment, where a manager doesn't make all the signings and he doesn't control the ins and outs. And obviously we're in a transfer window now, nothing's happened, but he doesn't get to just take full control. He has to answer to someone, and the board will make the final decision. You get some say, but you have to answer to people before you do you like that style, or would you prefer the manager to be completely backed with all of his targets? How do you react to kind of those quotes in the way that Marina really does finalize the papers kind of thing?
I think this is kind of where, as an ugly American, I can completely understand this structure, because it's kind of what I've been more familiar with my whole life. I mean, yeah, there are some in American sports, these huge figures that are coaches and also make all the signings as well. You think of like Bill Belichick, the New England Patriots coach, but for the most part, there is that hierarchy. So it makes complete sense to me. And I think as well, we should say that Marina Granovskaya is exceptional at her job, right? We talk about some of the incredible sales. Chelsea are probably the only big Premier League club that regularly make big sales that help fund, further development, have made this club sustainable. I think, you can't go on just spending the owner's money for the rest of time. So I do think that she's really good at her job and deserves the respect of the Chelsea supporter. And I think to kind of to piggyback off what Mike was saying, I do think that at the very least Chelsea, in the manner in which they run their club, are consistent, right? They set a standard and they expect coaches to live up to that standard, particularly when they back the manager with huge signings. Now, as you say, like the manager can have gripes about the fact that it wasn't precisely the signings that he would have gone out with 250 million and spent, but they're still great players. He still, was part of the recruitment efforts to try and bring them to Stamford Bridge. So you can't say that Lampard didn't want these players. He just wasn't able to get, and I don't want to say anything out of them. I just don't think it was enough to be a step forward. You think about in the Premier League, really, you look around the big contenders. Manchester City signed Ruben Diaz to help bolster their line of defense, and they also brought in Nathan Ake, but hasn't really figured that much. It's really only Ruben Diaz, right? Manchester United, they brought in Danny van de Beek. He hasn't really done a great deal. Spurs have only really brought in Højbjerg, that's figured into their midfield. Like the other contenders, Liverpool, they brought in Jota, who was a really good signing, but they didn't bring in 4 or 5 signings, and so I think there was probably an expectation that not only would Chelsea take a step forward, but kind of shrink the gap with the top, and that just didn't happen. And I think ultimately the manager is going to be the one who that's blamed on, because I think everyone probably agreed these were great signings. Ziyech, Werner, Havertz. Did anyone have a complaint about them when they happened? Probably not. So I do at the very least admire how much they stick to their standard, and ultimately I think what happened in the first half of the season fell short of that standard.
Yeah, I always felt like top 4 was going to be the minimum standard this season, at the bare minimum. And that even in the quotes was saying, I think Roman didn't even deem that a success or anything to celebrate about. It wasn't even what he was aiming for, but that was always what I was looking to scrape the barrel with. I think, this team, they are very talented, and you can see, even with a few tactical tweaks from Tuchel, changing formation, you've got Jorginho and Kova, which maybe a lot of the fan base don't rate too highly in their defensive contribution and whatnot. We've seen a lot of criticism for them, but if you surround them with a back 3, you give them Mason Mount ahead of them, you surround them with energy, you can make up for the lack of mobility and put them in a system where they can flourish and do a good job. And we saw that against Burnley. Mike, I want to get your thoughts on Burnley, because Burnley was such a complete, controlling, good, solid performance. And what I took from that game so much, now that I've calmed down, because yesterday I was absolutely hyped, I can't lie, on my review. But what I took from that game was that we had so much control in the second half. Like, I didn't, even though he was only 1-0 up, you know, so often Chelsea give you the fear that they're going to concede and make it 1-1 and we're not going to get what we deserve. But that second half, the ball was zipping around at pace. They controlled the game. They kept trying to create opportunities. And again, we've seen the stats. No shots on target for Wolves or Burnley in the first 2 games under Tuchel. So we always were in control somewhat. What did you make of the performance in general?
What I made was I saw things that my novice eye would jump off the screen saying, oh, that is a tactical adjustment. Here we have a manager seeking answers. I saw things that were outside of formation, which is easy to tell. Gaps in the midfield are all of a sudden gone. Gaps that were there are no longer there. Balls being sent over defenders directly into the box from the midfield, as opposed to sometimes people would accuse us of being hopeful cross FC. Balls with purpose, more creativity. Jorginho sending balls over the tops of defenders and instinctual runners running into the box. These things stuck out. These were changes. Like I said, we were running into a brick wall game in, game out, saying just be better. That's not always the answer. Sometimes it's that simple. We tried that way. Obviously didn't work out. Chelsea, no Chelsea supporter was happy with how this season was going. It was just a matter of how much time do we sit on this. The Premier League actually helped Frank Lampard out and maybe helped Roman be a little bit more patient, because every time it seems that Chelsea were dropping a result, it gets some help. But you could point to that and actually be a reason for why we need to be more aggressive in making it change the way that we did, because the Premier League is for the taking. We needed a change in tactics. I thought Jorginho, it's not sexy. And Mason Mount and Callum Hudson-Odoi, everyone was blown away. But you know what my takeaway was? As good as they were, Jorginho did a really good job of getting the ball to those players in space. Jorginho is a selfless player. I understand he's not the most pacey, but I'm also not going to stand up and yell at my TV saying just be faster. Jorginho has his limitations on defense. What he brings to the table is a specific skill. And I thought he executed that skill brilliantly. Callum was great. Callum was going to be man of the match. Mason was brilliant. I thought Pulisic was really good when he came on at halftime. But for me, Jorginho had the most important performance in that match outside of Callum Hudson-Odoi. I thought he was brilliant and set up his teammates brilliantly.
Yeah, he created four chances, I believe. Might be joint most of Callum, or it was top. He had a really good game, and he wasn't so good against Wolves, but this game for me, like you said, really performed really, really well. You know, for me, we don't have a lot of midfielders, probably him and Billy Gilmour, that can actually control the midfield, dictate the tempo, change the tempo of the game. And a lot of, there's been a lot of criticism for these two players in terms of, not Billy, but more Jorginho and Kova, that they always pass sideways. They're very lethargic on the ball. They don't make progressive forward passes often enough when there's opportunity to do so. But I think, again, that's all down to instruction as well. And I think it's very clear. Tuchel said, listen, I want vertical passes. I want the speed and the tempo to be high. And he on the bench was vocalizing that constantly. He was very vocal on the bench the whole game. I don't know if he's going to be able to survive the season in terms of his chest. We'll see what happens there, because he was non-stop shouting the whole game. And I was really impressed with that. Chris, what did you make of Thiago Silva? Because he kind of goes under the radar, doesn't really get maybe the plaudits he deserves. But the whole season, he's just been consistent at the top level. I'm seeing him diving around, making brilliant headers, great awareness, positioning. He was great again, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, we get different commentators than you guys, but on a couple of occasions in the match against Wolves, the analyst pointed out, hey, he read that well ahead of where it came from, right? And that's just the brilliance of having a player like Thiago Silva, is the thinking 2 and 3 steps ahead of everything that's going to happen. Ultimately, you think that it'll come married with physical limitations, but we haven't really seen those yet from a 35-year-old player. So Thiago Silva has been immense. I just think generally you hit on a point which I think is completely fair, and I think a lot of Chelsea fans value this, is that defensive solidity. I don't think a lot of Chelsea fans enjoy the amount of chances that were conceded to teams that, in theory, you should be dominating, not only in terms of the scoreline, but in terms of you shouldn't be able to even get near our goal, which is ultimately the standard that Jose Mourinho set 15 years ago. And I do think that in these 2 games, we haven't seen opposition get anywhere near. Now, you kind of wonder how much of that is approach. It was weird how negative Burnley and Wolves were away at the Bridge, but still, the defensive quality has shown through, and I don't think it's probably talked about nearly enough with Tuchel. I don't necessarily think it's going to be, defending in the way that a lot of people talk about defending, which is, do you line up your blocks of 4 and keep everything in front of you. It's more about how do you harry the person on the ball so that they are likely to get rid of it and you can win it off them. And I think that ultimately is something that it's a lot sharper for me, and I was expecting it to be sharper with Tuchel as compared to what was happening previously, is the person on the ball does not have as much time or as many passing outlets as they did previously, and Thiago Silva marshals that defense incredibly well.
I couldn't agree more. And this question here comes in, well, for FPL reasons, but will Chilwell ever get into the squad of Tuchel? It's definitely way too early to make any conclusions or any, hypotheticals about what Tuchel's going to do. He's a very flexible manager. He's going to use different systems and formations. He's going to go from the 3-4-3 to potentially a 4-3-3, etc. So players that don't look equipped for this system will maybe get into a different system. But one thing I say of Chilwell is I definitely feel like his performance has dropped off in the last month. And now he's going to have serious competition. He's going to have to step up his level. I think technically he still has some way to improve as well as a young player, but I think Tuchel can do that in training. And this is what I like about having a more experienced coach, someone that can really train and improve the players, because there is some players that we're going to get into that are maybe lacking in confidence, that need to improve the fundamentals of their game, their first touch, their output. Chilwell, Timo Werner. I mean, Timo Werner again, really, not great, again, really not getting another. When he doesn't get a goal, it really it's over for him, isn't it? Because that's what he needs at the end of the day. He needs a goal in his game to really get the confidence going. Mike, are you worried about Timo Werner at all? Because obviously, he hasn't had the greatest of starts to the Premier League so far, but his head seems to be down at times, but his mentality does look good as well. He keeps getting in the right positions.
Yeah, how can you not be worried? This was somebody that had a really good goal scoring record, and it's just not happening. And when your goal scorer isn't scoring, at least he's finding ways to impact the game. And when you look at the sale price, it's actually kind of a bargain deal that Chelsea got on Timo Werner at the time. You can't really have the conversation about Timo Werner, unfortunate as it is, and it might be unfair, without addressing the Kai Havertz signing, because to me that's a far more crucial signing to get right, because for obvious reasons. It was super expensive. It was a crazy expensive signing. By the way, we mentioned all these players that got in. Every manager heading out is always going to feel like their club didn't make all the signings, but the club did support Frank Lampard. Look, Ben Chilwell wasn't. I think I did a pretty reasonable job in polling Chelsea Twitter. Wasn't really the most popular left back option amongst Chelsea fans, and that was Frank Lampard's handpicked left back. Well, now what do we do if we're not playing a traditional proper left back? He can learn. He's young enough, as you mentioned. Reece James may have to learn a new position. I thought he actually looked really threatening in that new position, but you don't have to panic, because you mended fences with Marcus Alonso. Say what you will about him, and I know, Ma, you were a little frustrated. I'm
still deeply hurt personally, but I'll let it go. When someone storms off to the team bus for the legend, it gets sticky for them. But as long as he performs on the pitch, I'll let it drop until the end of the season.
I understand what a sensitive subject, but he's an experienced player. He knows the position well. You could do a hell of a lot worse with him holding it down right now while Ben Chilwell comes up to speed. Also, Chilwell looks a little tired. But to answer your original question about Timo Werner, it's interesting, because you can imagine why Lampard sucked through that FA Cup was they were finalizing the deal with Tuchel, right? In his last game, I kind of felt like we might have unlocked some of the mystery surrounding Timo Werner. Like, he's responding to this 4-4-2. I know he missed the pen, and that was I was devastated for the player and seeing him miss a pen, but he played so well there. I think, and it's not just a German thing, I think Tuchel has a track record that we're going to have to trust. He has a track record in developing young players, young German players as well, that Frank Lampard just doesn't have. Frank Lampard was a young manager, and we didn't have a lot of experience to lean off of, and maybe that's in part what got him in trouble. It's because he didn't have all that experience. Tuchel has the experience in dealing with, like, look, if you can manage Neymar's personality, Timo Werner, and getting him to pick his chin up, I don't think that's a very tall order for him to have. He does good things, though, Timo. We all want him to get on the score sheet, but he's not a player that if he's not impacting the game with goals, you can write him off. He can do things that can create havoc. Just look in this most recent game. He had a touch in the box he didn't do much with, but he made up for it in the very next attack down and put a ball up on a silver platter in the box for Mason, and Mason mishit it. So Timo can impact the game in positive ways even when he's not scoring. I can't say the same for Kai Havertz. I don't really know what kind of player this guy is just yet.
Oh, really? I go the other way. I actually worry more about Timo than Kai, because I think Kai, he is very versatile. He does have a lot of positions, so it's hard to pin where you want to put him, which I think Tuchel is going to be interested to see where he does place him. But fundamentally, in terms of ability and talent, he's got, so much in his arsenal in terms of the heading ability, the creativity with the passing that we saw at Bayer Leverkusen, the skill set, of course, as well. He can get goals. He has shown work rate at times, although he does look lethargic at times as well. I think one thing he needs to improve on is his body when he's defending the ball when he receives it, because he can get barged off the ball, but he can have turnovers which we don't we never want to see, especially in deeper areas as well, which have happened a few times this season. Chris, I want to move on to a very important player, which is Mason Mount. He's risen to the occasion really well, I think, because he's got a lot of slack on social media very often now, really since he joined, Lampard's son and all this kind of stuff, similar to what Jorginho used to get with Sarri. And again, similar with Jorginho, when Sarri left, Jorginho stayed the course, and Mount was always going to stay. But it's impressive to see Jorginho stayed the course, and he actually did perform quite well at the start of last season. Mason Mount is doing very similar. That's the parallel, is that first 2 games, impact off the bench, and then plays really well against Burnley. What have you made of him this season? Because he's been, like Thiago Silva, another very consistent performer, I think.
And again, another player who you kind of notice things that are not the main things in a football match. And I think that's ultimately probably what the disconnect is for a lot of what happens with Mason Mount, is he does so many things that aren't the glamorous bits of football, the things that make highlights. And so if you're just watching the highlights of a game, maybe Mason Mount wouldn't figure as much as some of the other more star players, but I still think for a coach, it's an immense job that he does. And I do think that, Thomas Tuchel, for instance, wants to press high up the pitch. He wants to counter-press, what they call the Gegenpress in Germany. Like, Mason Mount's perfect for that. And so I absolutely think he'll have a role to play. And I do think that the step up from playing in the Championship at Derby County to playing for Chelsea is so huge that someone like Frank Lampard did have to back him, because I don't know if another manager without that history would want to put a player who only has Championship experience and experience in Holland as well straight into the first team on a regular basis. So I do think that Lampard definitely did back him more than any other manager would have. But I do think when you kind of marry that with what Gareth Southgate has said about Mason Mount, these coaches have to be onto something, right? I don't think, definitely myself as a pundit who's never played or coached the game before, can tell coaches, hey, you're wrong to rate this player. Multiple coaches who clearly see things on the training pitch and in games as well that are immensely valuable. So I think Mason Mount definitely does a lot of things off the ball that are huge. I also think that he can improve his finishing touch, both in terms of setting up other people to score and scoring himself. But I think he will absolutely have a role to play. He's done enough in his time at Chelsea under Frank Lampard to prove to any coach that he deserves to play. Now, I guess the thing is, the reason why it draws headlines is how much will he play? How much will he figure? Is he a first-choice player for Thomas Tuchel? That remains to be seen, but ultimately every team sheet, that's kind of one of the first names you look for is, well, where is Thomas Tuchel on Mason Mount today? And we'll see, with such a huge game against Spurs coming up, where he rates the player.
Yeah, and I think he's really improved this season since moving to that number 8 position for the majority of it as well. I think he's created the 4th most chances in the league behind, the likes of Kevin De Bruyne and those type of players. So I think he's just gone plus 50 plus chances created. So I'm really impressed with him this season. And obviously in that, he was taking up some really nice spaces in the right channel with Hudson-Odoi. They were getting the ball out very quickly to the right-hand side, and then him and Hudson-Odoi had really good link-up. And they would create opportunities over there, whether drilling it across or, cutting, checking back in and having a shot or something like that. So I was impressed with the link up there. And I think when Reece James maybe starts to figure more regularly when the team settles under Tuchel, that those 3 potentially in that side could be deadly. And the reason why I segue to Mount playing the right channel, because we played Tottenham away. Last time we was Tottenham away, we won. We won 2-0. William got 2 goals. Mason Mount played in that right channel in the front 3, and he played very well as well. Are you guys confident for Tottenham? I mean, we've got obviously a new dawn, new day, new manager, new system, new lease of life in the players. Mike, how are you feeling going to Tottenham? Obviously, they're looking a bit ropey. Potentially, we can go there and get a win.
Yeah, we were actually at that game, that 2-0.
So was I.
Yeah, I mean, how electric was that at Tottenham
Yeah.
Hotspur Stadium? I was always telling Woody, what a bad decision they made in putting aluminum side panels across those concrete walls. Because, man, that away crowd was something. It's another reason why I was mourning the loss of Frank Lampard, and that I just remember him celebrating with the away fans. Just the connection that he had to us. I know Jose tapped into it, Conte to a lesser degree than Jose, but you bring out the most passionate. It's cultish. It's tribalism at its purest in that moment. Although Jose had his comments after. Look, I am more hopeful, certainly. In the United States, the stock market is a big story right now. Well, Chelsea stock is slightly pointing up right now. People are buying stock. People bought the dip with Chelsea, and now it's shooting upward. And Tottenham Hotspur on a downward trajectory right now. You're getting them at the right time. Now, they know exactly who they are, too. I imagine we're going to see a defensive-minded team yet again, but I don't think we'll employ the same tactics that Frank Lampard had, which, look, Frank Lampard was maybe ahead of the curve on the rest of the Premier League in that it's more important that we limit this counterattack of Son and Harry Kane than it is that we do our thing. In retrospect, considering where Chelsea are right now, that's a good result that Chelsea got. And a lot of teams took that blueprint and have limited what Tottenham can do on the counterattack. It'll be interesting to see. We have a different formation. I do want to highlight one player, and it's a player that you yourself are highlighting over your shoulder right there. I love Reece James. Our podcast was singing about Reece James. We interviewed him on the podcast. I love Reece James. I think there is a real path for him here to be a special right wing back. I know a lot of us are wanting, well, how can we get Callum Hudson-Odoi and Reece James on the pitch at the same time? And it comes all too often at the expense of that player, Dave, the captain, over your shoulder. We don't have to be in a rush to hand the reins over to Reece James just yet. When you have a player bombing forward the way that Callum Hudson-Odoi, and to his credit, spectacular tracking back. The defensive work that Callum has done is not sexy. We want to talk about what he does in the attack, but it's just important, really. Victor Moses did this all the time. Victor Moses would put Azpilicueta in terrible positions sometimes. Terrible. And Azpilicueta always rose to the occasion. If you're going to have a player, an attacking-minded player like Callum Hudson-Odoi right there, and looking where Chelsea are at the table right now, you can't necessarily go through the growing pains of Reece James positionally trying to figure out how he's going to respond to Callum Hudson-Odoi bombing forward. That player, Azpilicueta, is massive, I think, for this Spurs match. Now, I don't know this manager. I'm learning him. Azpilicueta may not even feature in this game. But to me, you turn to leadership, and Frank Lampard tried that, and it didn't necessarily work out towards the end. But so far, so good, whether it's doing a rallying cry within that locker room to get the Chelsea fan base off of certain players whose name leaked out in the media. He's doing skipper things, okay? And he's getting on the score sheet.
That was a goal. That was a serious goal.
Oh, dude. Oh, jeez. Beautiful goal. Far too often, we try to push this player out the door, a player that has scored now for 6 managers at Chelsea. I think I said it at the beginning of the season, his versatility, his leadership, there is so much more there. So many more contributions Azpilicueta can make. And I think right now he'll aid in getting Reece James up to speed at that position if that's where Tuchel envisions him. We don't know. Yeah. We don't know. But you could do so much worse. Let's quit trying to throw dirt on the man's grave. This guy is a great player for Chelsea. Amazing contributions. And I hope to see him again against Tottenham. I really do. I think Chelsea win this match. I think we're catching Tottenham at the right time. I think there's generally a positive momentum right now for Chelsea. Players are happy to be there. Players are happy to have a change of scenery. Players are excited about the opportunity to be put in new places on the field and express themselves. I think Callum, for one, is really responding to this. It's good to see. I know we were all a little worried that Mason wasn't starting in that match, but he comes on, does the most with his opportunity outside of get on the score sheet, and is dynamite yet again. So people are rising to the challenge. We have a young team. For many players, for many first teamers, this is the first time they've gone through a managerial change.
Yeah.
With the first team. We need to see how they respond to a little bit of adversity, whether it's lack of playing time or just, if you want to frame it as that, or just framing it as getting them online. I'm excited about the opportunities here. It's a new chapter. It was sad, but what way? Like, you want to get buy-in not just from the players but the fan base.
This is the game. Yeah.
Beat Tottenham. Tottenham, and we are a cult of personality. We will follow you. It happened to me. No, it's easier when you're a club legend like Frank Lampard. But you put up a good performance against Jose Mourinho's Spurs, and you got buy-in from this fan base, and we can finally turn the page and support this new manager fully, because I know it's been difficult.
100%. Ken Berry says you think the board has and will tell Tuchel to give players like J5, Rudy more time to get them into the shop window. Don't think they are long term. I mean, we can't tell who's long term and who's not. Right now, Tuchel will assess the team, assess the squad going forward, see who he can rely upon, see who he can't, and then I'm sure those decisions will come in the summer. But you know, there were reports that went out today that Lampard did want to get rid of those two players last summer, and the board actually didn't want to let go of them, or there was some sort of disagreement there. And the bid from Arsenal for Jorginho was rejected. So I don't know just how much the board want those two players out per se. Chris, I really want to get into this Tottenham game because the atmosphere, you guys went, right? What an atmosphere. I was there. It was limbs, as we say in the UK. It was just scenes. Everybody was losing their mind. And I went to the Ajax at home as well, and that was ridiculous. I can't even describe that. I don't have words. I don't have vocabulary.
Oh my god, I would have rather been at that one than the Spurs one.
That game was on drugs. That wasn't.
It's true. It's very much true. But that Tottenham game, like you said, the passion that was shown at the end of it felt like a real togetherness. Very similar to the Arsenal win away from home as well, where the team kind of lined up in front of the away supporters. Tuchel's got that energy. We spoke about it in terms of the sidelines and everything. The fan base online certainly seemed to, because that's all we can tell with, obviously we don't have the grounds open yet. They seem to be gravitating towards his quotes, the way that he speaks in the media. He seems to be, you know, again, the expectations of trying to win trophies seems to be ingrained into his brain. Of course, he's only got an 18-month contract as well, so he knows he needs to get started. Do you think, again, like Mike is saying, if he wins against Tottenham, do you think that will really just take everybody who's maybe not on board and just clear it all out and we just go into a run potentially?
100%. I think these are the kinds of games that ultimately determine the feeling about managers and determine the feeling about players. I mean, for as much as Kai Havertz has struggled this season, if Kai Havertz bags a brace in this game, we're right back on the Kai Havertz train. So for me, I think these are immense matches for managers. And I also, I do want to kind of pick up what you're saying about Thomas Tuchel and how he has kind of almost observed the club from afar and is kind of tailoring his managerial style and his public comments towards, I think, you know, what Mike was saying, he's getting very good advice, things that the fans want to hear, you know, talking about a lack of precision in front of goal. Obviously, the attackers have been a major storyline this season, talking about the need to win trophies. It's funny, like, I've read and heard from some of the people that have followed Tuchel for a while that he's almost more affable in English than he is in his native German. I mean, German just kind of sounds more rough to begin with, but he's more affable, and I think we've seen that. So I do think that he kind of understood what he needs to be for this club, but ultimately it's finding those answers against a Spurs team that come in limping, right? I watched their whole game against Brighton. I thought they were dreadful in the game against Brighton, and without Harry Kane, I just don't see a great deal of threat there. Carlos Vinicius is not a replacement for Harry Kane. We learned that in the 90 minutes at the Amex. So I do think that Spurs without Harry Kane are going to struggle, but Chelsea have to unpick that lock. You know that Jose probably in this game is gonna set up to defend, and that's ultimately been Chelsea's undoing for a good amount of time now, is undoing sides that are defensive. Do you have more patterns of play built out so that you can unpick those locks and make sure that, you know, down that right flank in particular, where you've had Azpilicueta and Hudson-Odoi, are you preventing Son Heung-min from getting into those kinds of spaces? Yeah, and you touched on it there. Harry Kane's obviously unavailable, which is a massive boost for us. You spoke about earlier as well, Mike, where we limited them to no shots on target, Son and Kane as a duo at Stamford Bridge, and obviously the rest of the league, you know, kind of went with that as well, and they've been getting joy out of it. That left-hand channel that you spoke about there, Chris, with Son, that may be why Azpilicueta must play, because he's got the experience in that role. And I definitely think, you know, Reece James is gonna show to be a very right-sided centre-back of a three. I think he's got all of the talent that he needs to play that position, in terms of he's played it in the academy, I believe, as well. He's played centre-back. He's obviously great going forward. We've seen him at Wigan step into midfield as well and be able to pick a pass. And we've seen Aspie
that back three very much becomes a two, and the right side centre back moves forward into midfield. And we saw with the goal, he was very high up, and he ends up becoming part of the way that we attack, and becomes that third man in midfield when we go forward. So I think that is something that Reece James is going to be great at. But again, like you said, don't change what's not broken. We've won two. We've put in two good performances. I obviously the first game we would have loved to have won, but when Tuchel was barely unpacking his toothbrush 24 hours before the game, there really is no time to say that you have to go and win against Wolves. It really was just lay down the foundations. But Tottenham, I think we were alluding to, they're going to probably play a low block. It's very difficult to know how we should approach that, especially when you've got players like you've mentioned, Timo, Werner, Kai Havertz, who are coming from the Bundesliga and probably are, used to playing in space. But we're coming up against games now: Wolves low block, Burnley low block, Tottenham, Sheffield United upcoming, Newcastle upcoming. It's all very similar. Teams that won't really want to come out and express themselves potentially will sit in that low block. I mean, I want to get you guys not what you think Tuchel will do, because I don't think anybody could predict what Tuchel will do. But what would be your starting lineups going into the game, and how would you approach it? We'll start with you, Mike.
I think Jorginho needs to be out there, particularly because I think we're on to something over these recent Tuchel performances, being able to get the ball directly into the box from the midfield as opposed to crossing them, which was our just default position all the time. What that means for the target man up top, I do not know. I think maybe Giroud might be the most natural fit against a defensive-minded side that's parking the bus in vintage Jose ways. We saw the two-man game from Christian Pulisic and Olivier Giroud provide some answers in Project Restart, in unlocking some of these. This is a problem that has been around for Chelsea dating back to Sarri ball. How do we unlock a team that is defensive-minded? Now it's Thomas Tuchel's opportunity to unlock this big answer, which is plaguing him. And well, honestly, their European fate depends on figuring out how to unlock the team, especially the way Atleti is performing. So I think I'm going to use your words. You ride the hot hand here. Frank Lampard maybe did that a little too much, but this is still early on. Alonso, I mean, he rises to the occasion against Tottenham Hotspur. They don't like him. They make that known. As for the for me, needs to be on there. I echo your sentiment. I love Reece James. I don't want to be the guy that's on the record saying we can't start Reece. Give him time to learn, because you don't have to be the paciest player to be positionally in the right place. Azpilicueta lost his pace. Wasn't ever the most pacey player, but he got on his mind, on his wits, on his veteran savvy. And you can get caught if you're out of position with aggressive wings bombing forward. And we're playing a big opponent right now in Tottenham. This is a massive match. I think Tuchel knows exactly what this means for his time here at Chelsea. I mean, as you mentioned, 18 months. So I'm going Pulisic, Giroud. I know Conte. It's interesting to see where Conte figures in. I'm curious. I'm actually curious to get your opinion on it. Where do you see Conte in this? Because the pivot of Kovacic and Jorginho that worked against Burnley, but are we going to not play Conte? Are we not going to play? Is Kai Havertz not going to figure in this midfield at some point? I don't understand what the long-term play here is, other than we need 3 points because it's essentially a 6-pointer against Tottenham. I'll worry about the long-term view after that. What do you think?
I rate Kante 100%. I think on his day he's world class. I think this club in the recent years have been overusing him, and potentially then either he gets injured or his performance dips off, like we've seen in the last month, and then potentially he's either scapegoated or he's blamed for it, or again we don't know how to find other solutions without him. And I think there is an over-reliance on Kante, and I always say this: great player, but every other team in the world don't have him, and they still play football. So we have to have other solutions into how to play the game without him. Now, I think he is definitely declining slightly, and that's not a crime to say, because the standards are this high. You'd say the same with Ronaldo. He's declining, but it doesn't matter because the standards are so high. One thing I love that Tuchel said is that he's going to play in the double six, and I love that. I wasn't too keen on him playing the lone DM role personally, because I felt like yes, defensively, interceptions, tackles, no problem. But I think when it comes to on the ball and it's time to dictate tempo, receive the ball, play those dangerous passes that you look for from deep as well, he didn't have that. And it was very short, simple, which is what you expect from Kante and what you want from him, because he's a destroyer and he comes to disturb, take the ball and then give it. But that allowed us, that kind of made us play more sideways and more out wide, and then you're lacking the vertical passing that we're looking for to really penetrate centrally for defenses. So I always felt like Kante in his best was next to a Matic, next to a Drinkwater, someone that would pick out a long pass, someone that could, play a bit with the ball, and Kante would do all of the groundwork around them. And of course, as well, when he picks up the ball, if he doesn't give it simple, he's very capable of going on a mazy run, low center of gravity as well, and he can get and dribble around players as well if he's fully fit. But we do need to manage him a bit better. So I think he comes into that double six with Kova and Jorginho. I don't rush to just throw him into the starting lineup. I think we've been guilty of doing that too much. We have a winning formula. I remember it last season when Frank was in charge of the early start. We had Tomori and Zuma. We was winning games, and then he just threw Rudiger straight in. And I felt like not only is it not fair, but also it didn't make any sense to me, because if you've got something working, keep it. And I think the chemistry is stronger between Jorginho and Kova as well than it is when you partner Kante with someone else. I still don't think Kante is the perfect partner. Maybe that could be Gilmour, you never know. There is a lack of strength, height, physicality in that midfield as well, which worries me long term. I think that's why the club were chasing Declan Rice. But I think Kante is going to play a massive role. Tuchel said that he likes Kante. He wanted him. Wanted Jorginho as well, I think. So he likes the group of midfielders that he has, which again, potentially why Gilmour stays and there's no emergency business. But I don't think we just need to rush him in. Just, he's going to get his game time. We're going to rotate anyway. But make sure that he understands his new role, because it is going to be a new role, and make sure that he can carry it out to the same level the other boys have done. So yeah, that's kind of my take on Kante. Chris, what do you make of Giroud starting? Mike has got Giroud starting. I've always held the opinion that none of our strikers are really perfect for the lone role. Giroud lacks mobility. Tammy's not great in the air, and Werner is just low on confidence, and also his first touch heading is not at the top level as well. So who would you maybe start up front for that Tottenham game?
I agree with Mike. I would go for Giroud in this match. I think Tammy was pulled off at halftime in the match against Burnley and was just struggling to get involved in the game, which, considering how much of the ball Chelsea had, was probably a bit surprising. But I think of the two strikers that have featured so far in the Tuchel system, I would definitely go for Giroud in this case. Again, these are also matches that you would presume, even without a crowd, will be hotly contested, and Giroud has played in big derby matches against Spurs before, both with Chelsea and, of course, with Arsenal. So I would agree with Mike's assessment. I'd go for Giroud, but I think ultimately the more attacking facets that you can have on the pitch at once is better. I noticed someone in the comments section called the current shape 3-2-5, which actually makes sense when you consider how far forward Marcos Alonso and Callum Hudson-Odoi get. But I do just kind of wonder if 3 defenders and 2 holding mids that don't offer a ton in terms of goal-scoring threat might just be a bit too flat at times. And yes, Hudson-Odoi and either Chilwell or Alonso are going to bomb on from wide areas, but I do just kind of wonder, as the game goes on, if one of those 5 players is sacrificed to get another attack-minded player on the pitch. I've always kind of wondered, and I liked Mason Mount playing a bit deeper than closer to the striker, just because I think ultimately he can have a much higher ceiling. I don't think as at attacking a number 10, someone close to a striker, he's got quite the ceiling to be a top level player, whereas for me as a number 8, I think he can be absolutely brilliant. So I do kind of wonder if playing Mount with Jorginho at some point, maybe it's 0-0 after 60 minutes and you need to pursue a goal, you can kind of make that kind of change. But I also would be surprised if Thomas Tuchel completely goes off the board and maybe goes to a back 4 in this game after he plays a back 3 in the first 2 matches. So I would not be surprised with any number of things, but I would definitely go for Giroud up top.
I've got a hot take here.
Go on.
So, a striker option that we're not really talking about because we're picking from the lot of 3. We've addressed that we have to get Kai Havertz going, and we've addressed how good he looks in the air, keeping in mind that we have a defensive-minded Jose Mourinho team, at least that we're all assuming, and what Kai Havertz showed even against Wolves. I mean, they were lucky to get a deflection on that because that ball was going on target late. Yeah. He might have had a winner, and then we're talking about an entirely different story with Kai Havertz. Being that Kai Havertz is good on the air, being that we're still trying to figure out where the best place is to play him, being that he played striker in the Bundesliga before, maybe not out of the realm of possibility that maybe not for this game, because I lean on Giroud and his experience in playing big games, but that might be a way to get him going, and he might actually be a longer-term option there. it'd be an interesting facet to this game. I wouldn't close the door on it.
I like that idea, that suggestion, because I've seen him play false nine for Leverkusen towards the end of last season. He's great in the air, like you said. He's very good at finishing as well. His link-up play is going to be probably, for me, better than Tammy and better than Werner as well, because he's used to playing deeper and he's used to linking up play and passing as well. We've spoken about his strengths there. So that actually really does interest me. He's very quick as well. We've seen, a lot of people, will say that he's not quick in the way that they see him in his mannerisms. But if you look at his top speeds at Leverkusen and whatnot, when he gets going and gets into his stride, and he did get into a really good stride in that Wolves game, I believe, he does start to pick up some serious pace. So he kind of does have the all-round foundations to be at least a false nine, and especially when you've got those two attacking midfielders right behind you, you are going to get the support. If you're playing the Mason Mounts there, Pulisic, Ziyech, you're going to get that support. You're not going to be isolated. So that definitely does interest me big time, because it's not like any of the strikers are exactly kicking down the door to start every single game. They're all consistently inconsistent in a way. I think Tammy's got the most goals, but then none of them are exactly lighting the place up game after game. Tammy even still could do better against the top 8 teams when he comes up against them over the last 2 seasons. So that definitely is something that I would look at, and I definitely see a comment as well suggesting that as well. So shout out to you. Rodrigo put out a super chat saying the pitch was horrible against Burnley. The groundsman must be a Lampard fan. A lot of people say that. I didn't notice. Did you guys notice the pitch wasn't perfect against Burnley?
I noticed, because it's usually not. It's something that we're taking for granted. I know there was snow on the ground, and that doesn't often happen. That's not necessarily something that the grounds team really have to encounter all that often there. But it looked like an American football game was played on it previous, to the point that I kind of got in Mason Mount's head a little bit, because you could tell after he hit that ball that was delivered brilliantly by Werner, he was kind of looking down at his feet and pitching the entire time. And maybe it just got in his head a little bit too much and started, because he didn't really strike a ball well for a while after that. So I'm not sure what's going on there, other than I'm not used to it. And anything that's uncharacteristic makes me, I know there's conspiracy theories out there. It might just be as simple as, there was some snow on the ground for an extended period of time. I'm not sure what was going on there.
To be honest, I didn't notice. I was just enjoying the game so much that maybe I didn't notice. But do you know what? That passing in the second half was so precise, so quick, zipping it around with real confidence that I didn't even notice that the pitch was damaged. So fair play to the boys.
Well, you're not American. Given Christian Pulisic's injury history, I can guarantee you I'm looking at the pitch more often than
and Loftus-Cheek as well. Do you remember that friendly?
Yes, I was there.
Was you there? Oh no!
I was there, and I walked to that specific part in the field. Now it was a great cause. It raised a lot of money, but in seeing the chunk of turf that was still loosened from that spot in the field, I was like, I can't believe that they played in this. Yeah. I mean, we won the Europa League final, and good to see Ruben Loftus-Cheek is starting to look better over at Fulham, looking like a stronger self. I'm still not sure he'll ever be that kind of player that he was under Sarri. He gave some interesting quotes recently, sort of waxing poetic about his time under Sarri. It's one of the more unfortunate positive charitable endeavors I've ever seen, because a lot of good came out of that. Like, a lot of good programs got funded, but now
a lot of people forget that. Like, a lot of Chelsea fans in the UK, I have to keep reminding them, it wasn't a pointless game. There was a really big cause. Unfortunately, that one patch of turf has potentially changed the whole trajectory and outcome of Loftus-Cheek's career at Chelsea. That pisses me off so much.
I'm with you. I know on the surface there was a lot of misinformation as to what was this, a cash grab in the middle of the season, a tour of the United States? What is that? No, not at all. They didn't take any money from that. It all went to a cause. But now Ruben Loftus-Cheek's cap is half the size that it was beforehand, and you can't really tout the amazing causes when you realize what could have been. It would have been interesting. I know that there's a segment of Chelsea Twitter that still tapes up for Sarri ball. It would have been really interesting if that injury never happened. Ruben Loftus-Cheek, what kind of player are we talking about right now? Is he still with Chelsea? Is Sarri still with Chelsea? I probably not.
Probably not, but I think Loftus-Cheek.
No, he wore out his welcome there, but it's one piece of bad turf. So naturally, I have PTSD because that was my first assignment with the club. I saw someone playing on a bad turf and get a really horrific injury. So I'm worried, given the soft tissue injuries that Chris has been dealing with. Every time I see bad turf, I get worried.
Fair enough. It's understandable because, like we said, I mean, it's the most unfortunate thing to happen to Loftus-Cheek because he was the second best player in the second part of that season. Him and Hazard were on the same wavelength. It was incredible. I got a comment here saying Kante and Kovacic is world-class midfield in my opinion as a pivot. I disagree, bro. I really do because when I've seen those two, neither of them want to hold. They're both better when they're allowed to adventure, whether it be Kovacic with his ball progression, dribbling wise, or is Kante seeking out danger and wanting to close down space. Neither of them want to sit and really occupy a space. And for me, it's got to be Gilmour or Jorginho with Kante or Kova, because that's for me the best blend where you're going to get a situation of one who sits and one who can be a bit of an adventurer in terms of either on the ball or off the ball. But again, there's a lack of physicality in all of those combinations, so it's never going to be perfect. 3-4-1-2, Mount at 10, Pulisic and Werner up top. Personally, I don't know what the boys think. I wouldn't play Werner against Tottenham. I don't think he warrants the start, and I also think that there's a way to get someone into form, and I don't think continuing to just play them over and over and over again is the way to go. And again, if we're coming up against a low block in Tottenham, we've heard Werner's comments playing a 9.5. That's his position, a left forward in the channel, running in behind. He wants space. You're not going to get that against Tottenham. I can guarantee Jose Mourinho is not going to leave any space. So, Chris, I mean, would you play? What do you make of that formation and then those two up front? Do you think that has any chance of working?
I'm with you on Werner. I don't think this is the match for him. I do think that you have to pick your form players in this match. Like, this is a really important game. Like, we should underscore this again. This is a 6-pointer to get towards the Champions League places. Leicester dropped points at the weekend. They're away at Fulham, and Fulham has given some tough games to teams in recent times. So you have to think about the result first and foremost here, and you think about your player development later. Ultimately, you're going to play Sheffield United. Man City rested a bunch of players before they played Sheffield United, and they eked out a 1-0, but they're able to get some different players out on the pitch. I think that's the game where you think about bringing Werner and also Havertz as well, because I don't think he represents a form player right now either. Ultimately, Thomas Tuchel has to pick his best 11 for this game. Whatever he thinks it to be after a week, pick it for this match. And I just don't know, given how he played in the Burnley match, because not only for me did he struggle in kind of the things that we've seen from all season, but he was starting to take these long distance efforts from like 25 yards out that were fairly tame for Nick Pope. And I think that's the sign of a player who's pressing and trying to do something special when ultimately things aren't working for him. So I would not go for him in this game. I would definitely go for, Giroud up top with, let's say, Pulisic and Ziyech off of him. We haven't talked about Ziyech much. He was rested because it was kind of said that he was in the red zone a little bit. So I would imagine he will go right back into the team, presumably as the right of that forward three, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. And I'm looking at the table here, boys, and this game could not be more crucial. I mean, we're level on points with Tottenham playing a game more. They've played 20, we've played 21. So obviously a win gives us the situation where now, okay, cool, we're level with Tottenham if they win their game in hand. And it kind of is a must win because we've gone through such a long patch of form, which has been so poor over the Christmas break. And I think much worse than we could have ever really, I know the Christmas break is always difficult, but we never would have foreseen that it would have been that bad. We do need to kind of go on a run to get ourselves back into that top four. 6 points off Liverpool off Leicester. With everybody having the same game played there. So that's kind of the target that we need to aim for to catch up in that regard. Obviously, we know the FA Cup would be good to win as well, and obviously Atletico Madrid. So the season in terms of objectives are quite clear. Just before we wrap up the show, I mean, what are your realistic expectations, and what do you think's gonna happen with this season going ahead? We'll start with you, Mike.
Top four. It's unfortunate that because that was the expectation last year. That was the hope last year. And it felt like a destination. It really didn't. It felt like a massive achievement, given everything that was surrounding the team, the loss of Eden Hazard and the transfer ban. Obviously, man, it's a bummer to come down from the expectations of post Leeds. We were talking title contention.
Yeah, we were. I remember my videos.
Yeah, I do too. You were a contributing factor to my excitement. But now it's survive. You have a young core. I do subscribe to the notion that young cores need to suffer a little bit before they get European glory. I was hoping that we wouldn't have to suffer against Atletico Madrid. I was hoping for a deeper run, but the way that they're cooking right now, it was a difficult matchup prior to them being in incredible form. So I'm a little nervous there. It'd be great to get some hardware. This is a club and a fan base that traffics in its success when it comes to cup competition. So let's win. Look, we got a really great draw in the FA Cup. I'm not one of these fans. Maybe it's the American in me, but I want to win all the trophies that are available. I think it's a pacifying gesture to just say, oh, it's the FA Cup. It doesn't matter the way that it would. Oh, it's just a Mickey Mouse cup. No, you're in the competition, and you're Chelsea. You win cup competitions. We make fun of Tottenham and Arsenal for their failures in said cup competitions. We can't just be saying, nah, I don't really care for that. I want to win the FA Cup. I want Olivier Giroud to get back into his garden. I want to lift that FA Cup. So that's my hope from this season. Top 4 finish and an FA Cup trophy, and feeling like we made the right decision because that was very difficult for me. Ultimately, in letting Frank Lampard go, if we're going to do something as emotional as that, I want to know that it was worth it. And a cup and a top 4 finish will make me feel that way. And whether Tuchel is the guy beyond that, we'll find out. We'll see what the summer window brings. Right now, there is an opportunity for these players to prove their worth and to punch their ticket onto this first team for next year. I'm really curious to see who steps up to the occasion.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. I hate it when people disrespect the FA Cup in terms of we're better than that. No, we're not. No, we're not. This team, especially, if any team needs to win it, it's this team because they're young. They haven't experienced many trophies. You've got a lot of Cobham graduates. You've got a lot of young players from overseas in terms of Kai Havertz, Timo Werner, who winning a trophy would mean the world to them as well, getting it under their belt, the first one in their Chelsea career. Tuchel as well, that would be huge. So I just think this whole group needs a trophy. It will galvanize them. It will get the togetherness. And I think last season, if Frank had got that against Arteta, that would have been a huge moment for him in terms of keeping that squad togetherness and that unity going into this season. So I can't echo enough just how important it is. Chris, what do you think of the season in terms of expectations? Do you think we have a chance against Atletico Madrid? I know that they're top of La Liga and quite clear as well. I think they've got a few games in hand last time I checked. But
yeah.
Do you think we've got a chance there in terms of obviously we've changed manager and now there's a new ethos, or are you kind of just focused on the league and the cup?
It's 10 points clear with a game in hand for Atleti. Yeah. I mean, when the draw came out, I was like the most optimistic amongst our group of friends because I for me, when you go into a tie with Atletico, I don't feel like they're ever going to run you over. I don't ever feel like, it's going to be like what happened with Bayern Munich last year where you go away to Munich and you just don't feel like you have a chance. So I don't ever feel like Atleti do that to top level opposition. So Chelsea do have a chance in that tie and Tuchel can come up with something special and, Atleti can be not firing on the day and, Luis Suarez right now is a player they're relying on. He's been brilliant, but if you went off the boil for a run of form, it wouldn't be that surprising. I actually I differ in mentality a little bit to the two of you. I'll be the dissenting opinion here. I think you want to leave this season not with any outcome or results. Obviously, top 4 is fundamental. It's more about the process. And do you feel going into next year with Tuchel that Havertz and Werner are starting to come online? Do you feel like, as we've talked about a bunch, when you go up against teams with low blocks, you have answers, right? Do you start to find those attacking answers? Because ultimately, one of the things we talked about in the preseason, why we thought Chelsea would make a leap forward, is because they signed all this attacking talent. This should be a team that hits for 3 or 4 on regular occasion, and through 21 games has scored 35 Premier League goals. That's not where I thought Chelsea would be. So from an attacking standpoint, I want to see a real evolution. I want to see some of those answers going forward. So I'm not necessarily thinking about FA Cups. Obviously, those are immense competitions to go and win, but it's more about the process. Do you feel like you've made a good appointment in Thomas Tuchel and he can solve some of the issues that you've had in recent years?
Yeah, I think really well said, because I would be very disappointed and alarmed if we were to sack him if he didn't meet the objectives. When someone comes in halfway through a season, I think they deserve at least a full season, transfer window, pre-season, to get everything that they want as much as what they can get, under control, and then give them a fair shake. Obviously, you guys are from the Mic'd Up podcast, Chelsea USA representing, and I want to talk to you a bit about that. Just what is it like to interview these players? Because I knew a few because they're around my age group, so it's weird for me to look up to them, so to speak, because they're in my age group. You always really look up to your elders in a sense. So I went to school with Joe Gomez, who's at Liverpool now, and Casey Palmer, who was at Chelsea and is now out on loan. Or he might be sold. I'm not sure anymore. Our loan system is just too big. It's ridiculous to try and keep up with. But in terms of we talk about players. Sometimes they're very media trained and they never get to put their full personality across. I mean, who's been the biggest personality for you guys interviewing out of the Chelsea squad for the podcast so far, Mike?
Oh, you're asking me first, man.
Yeah, I'll go first. Yeah,
I'm the emotional one. There's such a catalog. The club has really blessed us with really cool interviews. Petr Cech to Ashley Cole to. I had a lot of fun with Olivier Giroud. Honestly, I didn't have Olivier. I didn't have Olivier.
I think I saw you talking about the hair and
where he dunks on me. I walked into that. But yeah, I mean, I went into a gunfight with a pocket knife there, comparing my hairline to his. But I was really, if there's one, I hate to frame this as a positive, but we had to rework the way that we did the show in a pandemic. And to be able to see people now via these telecommunications apps, like Zoom and whatnot, to be able to be in a waiting room and you kind of got the nerves, and then all of a sudden Petr Cech just shows up and you're like, holy shit. That's Petr Cech. And I'm just like hanging on. Even Witty, who's a neutral, when you're talking about the 2012 Champions League final with guys that lived it, when Ashley Cole and Petr Cech said so many great stories about that Champions League final. You can find it You can find it in our archive at Chelsea Mic'd Up. I mean, goosebump tingling moments that even the neutral had to admit. Obviously, we're American, and Christian Pulisic means so much to American soccer hopes.
Of course.
And we were actually, my whole genesis with this club was we were in London on a Boxing Day trip when they announced that they were signing Christian Pulisic. I did a fan video from the Cock Tavern over there, and then a relationship sprouted. I am to be able to build these interviews up with Christian, who's going to be joining us here this month as well. These are kids. These are
they are. Yeah.
And when you're talking to a Billy Gilmour and you realize, oh, he's just a boy. He likes video games and TikToks, and you realize the maturation. Now, we've interviewed Christian several times. I'm really interested in seeing like post-project restart Christian Pulisic. Are we going to see more confidence? So that is a very long-winded answer on me just saying they've all been kind of cool, especially the legends like Ash. I did Ashley in person.
Oh, wow.
Here's a great story, Ma. When I was in Austin, Texas, doing some Chelsea work, and I interviewed Ashley at a couple of events that we had for our fans. And my very first episode of Chelsea Mic'd Up was I was interviewing Ashley Cole. I didn't even have the podcast built out yet, but we had Ashley there and we had to record. So I did that in studio. I'm like nervous. I'm sweating. But prior to that, my relationship with Ashley is fortified. And Ashley had this reputation of, it's like, I don't know if he's just meeting me. Is he going to treat me like I'm conventional media? I don't know how this is going to go. We're at this fan event, and I'm being introduced to Sean Wright Phillips, and Ashley is just sitting there. And Ashley and I did a couple of social media videos, and I'm the American, so I'm just going to tell. We're in Austin. Come on, Christian. We're all waiting for his first Premier League goal. Come on. It's the game against Burnley. And Christian
what
perfect hat trick. So I have a video on my phone. I'll DM it to you where I'm like big timing Sean Wright Phillips reaching over to high five Ashley Cole. And I'm like, I told you. And Ashley's like, that is peak. It is so great for me to be working for the club that I love. It's a pinch me moment week in and week out. We're also really enjoying getting to know the Chelsea women's team. M-Dog, Millie Bright.
Yes,
that's a top
friend
5
of the show.
We love Millie.
That's brilliant to hear, man. I can't echo that enough in terms of I've worked with the club once now in terms of I was on the show with Savage Dan and Zach. They have a weekly show. They're great. I had Zach on a couple of days ago. Obviously, he represents Chelsea Football Daily as well, and he's on Sky Sports a bit as well. So it was great to have them on and talk to them. Very much similar to what I'm speaking to you guys about, is representing the club, interviewing players, and it is special. When I went to that studio, it was in London. Do you know what I mean? First of all, when I got there, I was like, oh wow, this this really blends in. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe like Chelsea flags everywhere. I don't know what I was expecting. It's just a normal studio. It's just a normal studio in London. But when I get in there and I see the set that I'd seen obviously on YouTube, and I see Zach and Savage Dan, and I see obviously all the cameramen, and the equipment is just incredible. Obviously the club, they've got some peas, they've got some money. Do you know what I mean? That was ridiculous.
They know what they're doing.
Yeah, 100%. And just to be on the show and to just be sitting there talking and know that you're on the club's channel, that was huge. There's no feeling like it. Yeah. Chris, who have you enjoyed speaking to, man? Because obviously there's so many names out there. There's so many different personalities in this Chelsea squad. You can see it just in the training pictures and the images. I don't know. Did you guys have this podcast when you was doing Diego Costa? Because I seen some madness from him.
No, although we did have Fikayo Tomori on, and he told us a story of breaking Diego Costa's nose. So that was pretty fun. I'll go for a couple. One, Mike already mentioned our Christian Pulisic interview, and that was like such a big moment for everyone. And I'm in charge of the technical side of the podcast, and so you remember this, right? We haven't talked about this in a while. So. On the day, I was sweating that this equipment needs to work.
This is the interview where all
the most important interview. Like, if we get audio of something while we're here, it needs to be this interview. And the power converter for my American mix board, I plug it into the UK converter, and my board completely fries. Like, the room fills up with smoke because my equipment fried. Right. Thank God I had a backup, and so we had to awkwardly share a microphone while interviewing Christian Pulisic. It sounds fine, you would have never known, but the bullets that I was sweating on that day, and then the same day we interviewed Bruce Buck, the American chairman of Chelsea.
Of course, yeah.
And that was like a super intimidating experience because you're walking in the boardroom, right?
I mean, could he potentially fire you?
I mean, probably. I don't know.
I think so.
I think he has the domain in order to do so. Yeah. So
I've never been sized up entering a room before.
Yeah. He scanned us up and down these guys.
Do I really want you guys working for me?
But it was really, that was another really cool one too. And again, everyone's got 2012 stories, and that was one where apparently they were putting the red ribbons on the Champions League trophy at halftime because Bayern were 1-0 up, and it was at the Allianz. So everyone's 2012 stories never disappoint, right? Like Ashley Cole's tremendous. He talked about literally almost being unable to walk to the penalty spot. Petr Cech talked about how he saw the size of a beach ball when he goes to save the penalty. He also told us a great story about his skull fracture, which some of those details are gory. But yeah, we've had some incredible. Bruce Buck was another top experience.
Yeah, and dipping into the history, we had a really good interview with Pat Nevin too. Obviously, look, I'm American, and not to be positioned as a glory hunter, but when I got into soccer here in the United States, you kind of essentially had to pick one of the top 6 clubs if you wanted to be able to keep.
If you want to survive.
Yeah. If you literally want to see them on TV, you couldn't see them on TV if you didn't pick one of the big teams.
Yeah, now because of how the game has grown here in the United States, you can be a Brighton and Hove Albion fan and watch every single game if you want. Hell, if they get sent down, you could watch every game if you want. The game's at such a different place right now. But dipping into history, educating myself, learning more and more about Chelsea's legacy, the good moments and the bad, learning about how they position themselves with their philanthropic efforts, their social causes. I know Roman put his name to some of the ugly abuse that was going on with Reece James and the club.
Yeah.
Now with an important message of support. It's not just a tax write-off for the club. And that makes me feel really good about the club because you always hear, we're in the bars here and people always have their lines to direct over at Chelsea fans. To know that it's real, it's genuine. These charitable efforts are really important to the club. They stress it, and it's not just lip service. When I was at the final whistle on Hate, I saw Roman. I saw Roman there.
Mad.
Yeah.
That must have been surreal.
Madness, but it wasn't lip service to him.
Yeah.
It's not a tax write-off. Like I said, these causes are important, and to know that they don't just talk the talk. It's not just a PowerPoint presentation. They do it in the community. FC Harlem, I
was just going to bring that up. Yeah,
massive stuff that the club is doing to bring about real change. And I hate to be. I'm in a rap battle with Alexi Lawless right now. because he did something. He did something like that.
So dirty,
dude. He did him no favors because I've noticed it. Look, there are hives of Chelsea fandom.
Oh yeah, 100%. There are hives.
Look, I don't want to. I'm nervous to say anything bad about Mason Mount because I ventured into those waters and I got my head bit off. I know what to do now.
I've done the same with Kante. You don't come out alive. Trust me.
And I know. Look, I'm American, and I'm like, oh, YeeHaw, and I got my guy very clear. Yeah, that's what it is.
I might put that in the. I might change the thumbnail. Just put YeeHaw in the quotes there.
You should change your name from Mike Ryan to YeeHaw in your little box.
But Alexi Lawless here in this country, it's kind of like a rib. Like it's a joke at like how Homerific he is. Like he's always like the irrational fan.
Yeah.
But internationally, Alexi Lawless is pointed to as this voice of American soccer, and everything we say is a very serious take, as opposed to him just being hyperbolic and soundbitey. When he said that Christian Pulisic is too good for the Chelsea, I wanted to rip my hair out because
too good for the Chelsea team.
Yeah, because it was that Man City game where Christian played all right. No one on the team really played well that game. Callum did some good things late in the game, but that game was lost by halftime, and Chelsea were in the middle of their bad run. That gets aggregated, and now you have Chelsea fans legitimately angry at Alexi Lawless and project that bile towards Christian Pulisic. Yeah, like I think Christian Pulisic had a down performance the next game. It's like, too good for the Chelsea shirt, are you?
I don't like it when just give the responsibility to the person who gave the opinion. You don't have to take that and translate it over to the other. It's just it's ludicrous, honestly. And also, I wanted to pick up on what you said about Roman because he did a lot in the UK for the NHS as well. When we was through the lockdown last season as well. Opened up the hotel for work to go on in there. So that's huge. And just to touch on your technical issues, I understand completely. I had a BBC radio interview in the morning of the Burnley game. And it was at 11:30. I thought, no stress. I'll get there. 11:10, everything will be fine. And I've got everything set up. My usual setup. I'm not in my usual studio. I'm in Ireland at the moment because Boris Johnson decided to make a muck of the pandemic. So I decided to flee the country, and I've come over here to saddle up and wait until it's over. But my laptop just turned off. And then I turn it back on. I'm like, right, and it's slow. And I'm trying to get the BBC link. You know how they give you the link and you can go into the studio, the setting, and then the audio and everything. Can't get it onto Google Chrome. Google Chrome not responding. I said, I've got to be on the radio in 5 minutes. I said, jeez. I was stressing out. Mom had to come in, the laptop. And it's just, honestly, I feel like no matter how much you are ready for a situation, bang, something will just mess up right before. But then you just always, just in time, get it sorted out. Like maybe 5 minutes to go, it ticks. I don't know what kind of mysterious potion is in the air, honestly, when it comes to technical difficulties and media. But
your equipment didn't catch fire.
Yeah, that's good. You were calling for your mom, though. You were calling for your mom.
Yeah, seriously. Anybody.
We all do. Whether they're in a near space or not, you just start shouting.
They're an ocean away, but she can still help.
Well, listen, boys, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Seriously, it's been the stories have been brilliant, the insight, and obviously the opinions from last game, the current talking points, and obviously Tottenham game coming up. We've spoken about the Mike Top podcast, but I know you guys work together on another show, isn't it? So talk to us about that. Plug it. Let us know where to find you on the socials for the people as well.
Well, if you're coming for hardcore American sports, not the show for you. I produce the Day 11 Start show with Sugats, which obviously in the UK is probably not well known, but here in the United States, I think we're still ranked number one. It is the top sports podcast in America. Wow. In America, it's a top sports podcast. I've been executive producing that show since I've been executive producer since 2009 or 2010. We recently made a transition. We were with ESPN. We are no longer with ESPN. The podcast keeps going up and up, regardless of our ESPN or lack thereof affiliation. Chris Wittyngam came aboard because it was in that moment of panic, in that smoke-filled room over that I realized, well, he has a backup. I can trust this guy, even though his brow is full of sweat beads. I know that I have a good soldier in Chris Wittyngham. It was the only reason Chelsea mic'd up happened because Christian Pulisic decided to sign for Chelsea, and the club always wanted to make strides here in the United States. It was always a path that was always one of the more popular clubs here in the United States, but there was such a wide lane for the club to absolutely rip that from any challenger's hands. Yeah. And in signing Christian Pulisic and having Christian perform the way that he did, it's a rocket ship to the moon right now. Yes. But I wouldn't have done it if Chris Wittyngam didn't sign on, because I know I knew from my history in building out all the Dan Le Batard Show podcasts and all the other podcasts affiliated with that monster brand, which again, I reiterate, is the top sports podcast in America.
I've seen the socials. I'm like, yo, this is a big thing. I know the UK, we obviously don't know about it too much because we're in our own little bubble, but that is a big show, I can tell, just from what I can see on social media, 100%.
And I'm looking at our numbers right now. We have 25,000 downloads this month in the UK. So
wow, just in the UK. Jesus Christ, you guys are popping. Yeah. Look at you.
Oh, dude, the weekly numbers. Go ahead.
9.8 million in the United States.
Let's go.
But 25,000 in the UK.
God damn.
Get in there.
Yeah. Get in.
Jesus, but that is incredible. Seriously. That's nearly wow.
Every day we have the immense pressure of interviewing a Christian Pulisic type on the Dan Le Batard Show. So I know that I need my good soldier on there, and Chris Wittyngam is as good as anyone in the business in terms of knowing exactly what my needs are or I need help. And look, man, he's a fountain of knowledge. He calls soccer games. He's a legit play-by-play voice here in the United States. This is a real good neutral voice. That'd be hard. A better neutral voice isn't readily available for me, and is willing to deal with all of my weird quirks, because our show, the Dan Le Batard Show, is Stu Gatz, flies by the seat of its pants. The tail is wagging the dog, and you're just on for dear life. And Chris knows that workflow and working with me. So he's great. He's a fountain of knowledge, and I'm usually generally a fountain of tears, sad or positive. There's been a lot more sad tears this year. But yeah, it's a Chelsea Mic'd Up podcast. It's the official podcast of Chelsea FC. Look, it's hard to break over there in the UK. We know it. We know we're the YeeHaw podcast, as I put it there. This is the second year. This is the second year of our podcast. We've seen growth. The club helps us out in getting big names. We hope with those big names and doing stuff like this, people will be willing to give us a try. Because that's what we provide, access. There's so many great Chelsea fan podcasts out there. I'm not trying to occupy that space. I want to do something entirely different, shed some light on maybe some of these players' personalities. Chris and I will break down the game to the best of our ability, but there's several places people can go for that. We understand that. We want to give you access and a level-headed view of what's going on, and hopefully you can add us to your buffet. We're not asking to be the whole pie. We just want to be a little slice in it. And if you could support a couple of YeeHaw Cowboys here in America, where their emotional biases on their sleeve, we'd really appreciate it, because it's difficult navigating. There's a lot of competition out here, as you know. You're a big piece of it. So a rising tide lifts all boats, right? Yeah. We're all in this together, and we're all helping each other out, joining each other's podcasts. That's great for the community. So thank you for having us and helping our podcast grow.
100%. Wow, man, you've said it beautifully there. And like I said, it was great to have you guys on. Chris, let them know where they can find you as well. I'm going to have links in the description after this is finished processing to the podcast as well and to their social media. So like I said, make sure that you go and follow the Mic'd Up podcast. You're getting exclusive access to players in a comfortable environment. You don't get that very often, trust me. And obviously their socials as well. Chris, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can follow us on Twitter. I would also recommend, even for UK-based Chelsea supporters, to follow at Chelsea FC and USA on Twitter, because they're putting good content out all the time. It's just another account to follow. And us, Mike's at Michael Ryan Ruiz. I'm at Chris Wittyngam. I know that, first off, even pronouncing the A is atypical to UK listeners. And also
I saw your last name. I was
the manner in which I spell it is wrong. It's wrong.
He's Colombian. He's Colombian.
Yeah, yes,
it sounds like he's from the UK. He's 100% Colombian. He has no idea how he got that last name.
No idea. But follow me at Chris Wittyngam, and follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts.
Fantastic. Well, guys, that's been the show. It's been an absolute pleasure having these guys on. honestly, I've been literally waiting to have them on because I was actually waiting for a Pulisic masterclass. I'm not gonna lie to you, but then I was like, you know what? I can't be bothered anymore.
He got into this. We were all waiting. We're all waiting.
Yes,
I was waiting. I was like, you know what? Time is everything.
I think we all want good performances.
Not surprisingly, the podcast does better when Christian does better.
Of course,
so, you know,
of course.
we'd be down for that.
You know, let's you know, timing in this industry is everything. Let's wait for a Pulisic masterclass. I was like, you know what? I can't wait any longer. If anything, next time when it happens, then we'll get you back on. But honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure, guys, and thank you so much for giving me so much of your time. People, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Like I said, after this finished processing, links are literally going to be straight in the description as well. And catch me tomorrow for the Battle of the North show. That's going to be with Drifty. That's going to be with Big Steve and Akeem. Manchester United, Liverpool, Man City show. Everybody's getting covered in the Big Six on this channel. And then obviously after that, we're going straight into Tottenham, even more focus on that before we play them on Thursday. I'll see you guys tomorrow. And again, thanks to the boys for having us.
Perfect.